Qualify for up to $150 cash back for your broken windshield. Autoglass America will install a premium quality replacement with a lifetime warranty at no cost to you. Wherever you are, Autoglass America comes to you with free mobile service. Make your money go farther with Autoglass America. 813-96-GLASS. That's 813-96-GLASS. Autoglass America.
From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gornosky. So glad to be back with you live across radio, podcast, and video stream. Coming to you, as always, on our website, aneighborschoice.com. That's aneighborschoice.com as our website. We've got a new podcast. We just released a discussion with Dr. Al Dannenberg, which is online only. So if you want to check that out, go to aneighborschoice.com right now, and you'll be able to see our latest, or go to our YouTube channel or our podcast, but our main go-to site, because we do hear from some of you guys that it's hard for you to find our content, like especially on YouTube and Facebook, that you try to find it and you have to go to our website to see it. Isn't that a shame? These sad, fascist little websites, they're so scared of holistic healing. They're so scared of nonviolence and love. They're so scared of anti-imperial discussion like what we do, that they, I guess, make it difficult for people to see our content. But we care not about them. They're not of interest to us. YouTube, Facebook, their editorial direction represents the old, failing paradigm of the 20th century, just trying to wrap its tentacles into the 21st century, but nobody cares. Nobody buys it. You know, it's amazing. You see these state-aligned media outlets like the Today Show and so forth, circling the wagons to present Dr. Fauci, their hero, the guy who was a genius enough to fund the Wuhan Institute of Virology as they did gain-of-function viral research. And then, whoops, it just so happened to most likely be the place of the outbreak of the coronavirus. This genius is represented as the, authority of what we're to do to the people who watch programs like CBS and Today Show and so forth. So they dutifully come out. When Joe Rogan said the other day, we played the clip where he said, hey, if you're young, 21, and you're healthy, I don't really see why you need to take this vaccine. And oh my goodness, I mean, they had to come out and provide the state response. But isn't it sad and how pathetic these outlets are with all their support, with all their institutional biased laws to protect their market share? They're still a fraction of the size of a podcast like Joe Rogan. That Joe Rogan, a stand-up comedian, has more influence and more viewers and listeners than NBC, CBS, and ABC combined. What a pathetic joke these people are. How pathetic and embarrassing. It's so embarrassing, it makes you just cringe. These people have such a stacked, rigged market. They've got all the government agencies working hand in hand with these outlets, and my goodness, their audiences combined are a fraction of what a stand-up comedian who provides commentary for UFC has. What a pathetic fail. My goodness, it's pathetic. You'd think that they'd have something bigger in terms of their audience and reach, but they don't. That a UFC commentator and stand-up comedian has a bigger audience so that they have to scramble and react to what he says. Man, how pathetic that must feel. Goodness gracious, to have all that government institutional power and support and be that irrelevant. that you have to react to a stand-up comedian because his platform dwarfs you as a faithful servant of state information like the Today Show. They say, Dr. Fauci says Joe Rogan incorrect to tell young people not to get vaccinated, the robots at Today Show say. So they come out and provide the official state media response, the Pravda response to Joe Rogan, who dwarfs them in their relevance, dwarfs them in their audience. How pathetic. How embarrassing that your Pravda and your audience is a tiny little baby fraction of what Joe Rogan, a stand-up comedian with no journalistic training, that his audience dwarfs them. And they have to come out like the little state PR firms that they are to try to scramble to catch up to the narrative that the majority of the younger generation is choosing, which is common sense. But Scott Stump, faithful writer for the Today Show, today.com, says Dr. Anthony Fauci says popular podcast host Joe Rogan is incorrect and recently saying he wouldn't advise healthy young people against getting the COVID-19 vaccine. The chief medical advisor to President Joe Biden, trained by KKK Robert Byrd, reacted on Today, Wednesday, to comments made by Rogan on the April 23rd edition of his Spotify podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, in which he said, if you're like 21 years old and you say to me, should I get vaccinated? I'll go, no. Well, that's incorrect. And the reason why you're talking about yourself in a vacuum then, Fauci told Savannah Guthrie, you're worried about yourself getting infected and the likelihood that you're not going to get any symptoms, but you can get infected and will get infected if you put yourself at risk. Thanks to the Wuhan Institute of Virology that you funded, Dr. Fauci. Thank you. Genius work. Genius. What a genius. I mean, can you imagine how much genius you have to be to provide our taxpayer dollars? He didn't earn that. He just took it. And he had a genius idea to fund the Wuhan Institute of Virology, even though the State Department was sending cables saying, don't do this, please. They don't have security protocols in place. Even though there's been cover-ups at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which is very connected to the CCP. But this genius, he has to react to a UFC MMA fighter podcast. That's how stupid is it? I mean, how pathetic. That the former host of Fear Factor sets the tone for the news cycle that Dr. Fauci has to react to. How embarrassing it must be. He says you can get infected and will get infected if you put yourself at risk. And even if you don't have any symptoms, you're propagating the outbreak because it is likely that you, even if you have no symptoms, that you may inadvertently and innocently then infect someone else who might infect someone who really could have a problem with a severe outcome. Why? Because they ate vegetable oils their whole life, thanks to the stupidity of the U.S. federal government and its allies subsidizing toxic trash, gobbledygook, nasty vegetable oils, corn oil, soybean oil. People who have eaten those things for decades because of their government, those are the ones who are at risk most likely of having a comorbidity that would cause this virus to wreak havoc on their immune system because their immune system wouldn't know how to fight it off as well, thanks to them following single-payer nutrition science. Rogan said he believes it's safe to get vaccinated, but if someone was a healthy 21-year-old who exercises and eats right, including not eating vegetable oils, processed flour, processed sugar, something Dr. Fauci speaks nothing about. Hippocrates said, let food be thy medicine. Dr. Fauci never heard of that. Never heard of it. He's too busy funding the Wuhan Institute of Virology with your money by giving it to Peter Daszak of EcoHealth Alliance. But Fauci said they should absolutely get vaccinated and countered that it's about more than just one person because they risk spreading the coronavirus to others. So if you care about the concern of others, Dr. Fauci, why aren't you telling people to get off the margarine, get off the seed oils? Why aren't you telling them to get off of the stuff that compromises the immune system, creates oxidative stress, and creates the immune system to go so out of whack when it encounters a new virus that most likely came out of the same lab that you were funding with our money, Wuhan Institute of Virology, CCP? Why doesn't today.com disclose that Dr. Fauci has a conflict of interest because he was the one funding with our money, even with the Obama administration saying, hey, maybe we should stop. He was the one that had the genius idea to fund the Wuhan Institute of Virology with our money, even after the State Department said, stop doing this, not a good idea. They don't have good security protocols in place. Go read Josh Rogan's book. Why don't they put a disclaimer saying he has a conflict of interest because he was the one that was securing the funding for the Wuhan Institute of Virology to do gain-of-function research on bat virus-related coronavirus, adding the spike protein as the gain-of-function? You start to get the picture here that this is not an honest piece of journalism, but rather a very biased piece of text. In fact, it's the modern equivalent of what we would call mythology in ancient times, in which the reality of victims, the reality of the victims who have eaten single-payer nutrition science guidelines like vegetable oils and processed flours, processed grains, the reality of what hurts them is hidden. It's concealed by bias. It's concealed by groupthink blind spots. And instead, you get these false gods presented to you as experts from on high. When in fact, these were the fools who funded, with your money, the very CCP lab, most likely the source of this ridiculous outbreak that has hurt so many people and destroyed the economy for so many people, and created trauma for billions of people. He said, I hate to say that if someone's, well, this is Rogan now talking, I hate to say that if someone's children died from this, I'm very sorry that that happened. I'm not in any way diminishing that, but I'm saying that personal experience that my children had with COVID was nothing. For adults who are vaccinated, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention eased its guidance on wearing face masks outdoors on Tuesday, saying people don't have to put them on while walking, running, biking, or hiking, or with members of their households or in small gatherings. Masks are still recommended in large outdoor crowds at places like sports venues or concerts. It means that we're going in the right direction, Fauci said about the relaxed rules. The thing that's being cleared just from the scientific evidence that the risk of getting infected if you are vaccinated and outdoors is extremely low. I mean, minusculely low. And that's the reason why the CDC has now come out and made these kind of recommendations, making it much more flexible for people who are vaccinated to get out and enjoy the outdoors. Fauci predicted that many high school kids would likely be vaccinated by the time the new school year starts in the fall, and children of all ages would be vaccinated by the end of the year. He still recommended that children wear masks in public before they get vaccinated. So it's going to flip, see? That's what's going to, it's going to flip. The political tribal identification with masks is going to flip. The ones who get vaccinated, they're going to have the new tribal loyalty of, hey, look, I don't have a mask. That means I'm vaccinated. And then the ones who are not vaccinated are going to be pressured to wear that mask until they get vaccinated. So the association with masks psychologically is going to flip in tribal loyalty, is what it looks like to me. All the same people who have been browbeating people to wear a mask, even in a deserted island, will now proudly signal their virtue of having the vaccine by not having a mask on. and the ones who have the mask on will be suspected of being non-vaccinated, organic. You see? So that'll be interesting to see that little poll shift in mimetic group thing. Interesting. Let's take a break and return live on A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gornosky. You can drop us a comment on our YouTube stream and Facebook video stream, or call in at 727-587-1040 with your thoughts. That's 727-587-1040. Back in a moment.
David Gornosky here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck on a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa. Not attorney spokeswoman.
Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm David Gornosky here as we look at another story that you saw a lot about, and that is the Gates scandal. Matt Gates. The AmericanConservative.com has a story about this. The Gates scandal isn't about Matt Gates. And it says it's now been the better part of a month since it broke in the New York Times that Matt Gates was being investigated for sex trafficking a minor, and he still has yet to face an on-the-record accusation. Since then, the minor has morphed into a former minor. It turns out she was 18. That's in the Politico. Gates was also accused of sharing revenge porn of a former girlfriend, including by Katie Hill, whom Gates had previously defended in her own revenge porn scandal. Two of that girlfriend's friends told Politico it wasn't revenge porn and that she told them, "This is the best I will ever look in my life." So the two most dramatic claims of the Gates scandal seem to be false, and we are still without an on-the-record accuser. Given Gates' reputation as a playboy and the leakiness of this investigation, you'd think something substantial might have come out by now. The girlfriend Gates was accused of sharing revenge porn of, according to Politico, also fears the former minor was recording calls attempting to incriminate the congressman. It also now appears that Joel Greenberg, the Seminole County tax collector who has been indicted on a slew of charges, was paying for the former minor's legal fees. Another friend of Greenberg told Politico he thought messages to him involving the former minor felt like a setup. So we have two, albeit unnamed sources who believe Greenberg or the former minor he was paying were trying to incriminate them, and that former minor he was paying is the one who accounts for the apparently untrue child prostitution allegation. What does this look like to you? Greenberg's lawyer has also pointed the finger at Gates, strongly implying the tax collector had flipped on him, saying outside the court recently, "I am sure Matt Gates is not feeling very comfortable today. It's a mystery to me, given what this all seems to look like, why Gates hasn't pointed the finger right back at Greenberg. Up until now, the Joel Greenberg situation and the bizarre scheme to bilk Don Gates for $25 million and an Iranian hostage rescue has been considered separate things in the media. I'm not sure why. The note to Matt Gates' father specifically links the two, as do the messages published by the American Conservative that indicate Bob Kent's friend, who works at the Israeli consulate, had inside knowledge of the Greenberg investigation before it broke in the New York Times. There are other aspects of the Bob Levinson rescue business that have so far escaped mention by the media, but are worth considering. Bob Kent, the man at the center of the alleged extortion effort, probably had reason to believe he was operating with at least the implicit sanction of the U.S. government. You don't go on Chris Cuomo's show and make reference to an operation to spring a prisoner out of Iran, which would be illegal without the United States government approval without it. The U.S. government's approval may have been more than just implicit. According to a senior Trump administration official, Kent was approved to receive $75,000 from the State Department for services related to the Bob Levinson case. A State Department spokesperson declined to comment on this. While we can't assume the State Department knew about the subsequent $25 million ask, that a federal government contractor is accused of extorting a U.S. congressman is deeply troubling. It goes on to say, Jeff Stein wrote in the Daily Beast that Kent, quote, showed me Interior Ministry and other security agency documents he'd obtained, which upon expert examination turned out to be a mix of clumsy fabrications and authentic papers of unconfirmed provenance. He now claims to have proof of life videos that the FBI says are inconclusive. It goes on to say, 3 years later, the amount of money Kent was asking for grew by 2 orders of magnitude, contrary to the text from Israeli consulate employee Jake Novak to Scott Adams. They don't seem to have come way down from $25 million. They actually appear to have come way up to it. There's clearly a lot going on behind the scenes here. Alas, after the Justice Department's performance these last 5 years, I don't have any confidence we're ever going to get the full story. I'd love to be proved wrong. That's by Arthur Bloom of the American Conservative. So remember that story? They touted it all over the corporate press, and then it's starting to fall apart. I mean, who knows what else is going to come out here, but are you going to get honest reporting about it? It's hard to believe, if you will. Hard to believe that you would get that, given the fact that, you know, Matt Gaetz has consistently been against perpetual war, which is the glue that binds all these lying PR firms for the state together. We'll take a break and return.
Ronald Reagan would turn over in his grave if he saw what's going on today.
Crazy things are happening.
You cannot be afraid. You've got to stand up for what you believe is right.
But one thing is for sure.
You can't trust anybody.
For talk, news, and information, you can count on us.
Enough is enough. I mean, I almost blew a gasket.
Good for the country.
I know what I'm talking about. A lot of wackos out there.
Your connection to talk about it. The all-new News Talk 1040. WHB.
Federal agents seized items at the home and office of Rudy Giuliani today. Authorities executing search warrants related to the investigation into Giuliani's lobbying efforts in Ukraine, a key focus in former President Trump's first impeachment. A related warrant also carried out for Washington, D.C. Attorney Victoria Tensing. ABC News political director Rick Klein.
The idea of a subpoena being served and a search warrant being served against a lawyer, much less a lawyer for a former president, is pretty extraordinary. And it suggests a pretty significant escalation in the inquiry that's been going on out of the Southern District of New York for some time.
President Biden making his first address tonight to a joint session of Congress. The pandemic will be front and center, from vaccinations and economic recovery to fewer members allowed in the chamber. The decline in overall COVID cases in the U.S. continuing on the downslide. The CDC showing hospital admissions dropped nearly 10% in just the past week. Michelle Franzen, ABC News.
Neighbor's Choice continues live now. I'm your host, David Gornosky, as we look at the news like nobody else does, guided by personhood, not groupthink. That means skin in the game for each individual. That we don't have to live by the lies of bullies. We can live with sovereignty, with dignity, with compassion and nonviolence. Not toxic groupthink, not toxic seed oils, those vegetable oils that they put and subsidize with our own money and put into our body with junk food and garbage. Here's a studyfinds.org story. COVID-19 alters human genes, explaining mystery behind coronavirus long haulers. For some COVID-19 patients, getting over their infection is just the beginning of the recovery. Over the last year, COVID long haulers have continued experiencing a variety of symptoms months after the virus clears. These include anything from skin problems to shortness of breath to losing the sense of taste or smell. Now researchers say they may know why this is happening. A new study finds coronavirus actually causes long-term changes to an infected patient's genes. Specifically, scientists reveal the spike protein of SARS-CoV-2, the virus causing COVID-19, creates long-lasting changes to human gene expression. These tiny spikes cover the surface of coronavirus cells. They allow the virus to bind to certain receptors on human cells and hijack their functions, leading to COVID infection. Once the spike cuts into a patient's cells, the virus releases its own genetic material into the cells so it can replicate. We found that exposure to the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein alone was enough to change baseline gene expression in airway cells, says Nicholas Evans, a master student at Texas Tech University Health Science Center, in a media release. This suggests that symptoms seen in patients may initially result from the spike protein interacting with the cells directly. Researchers examine how exposure to spike protein impacts cultured human airway cells in lab experiments. They also compared the results to studies using cell samples from actual COVID-19 patients. The team notes culturing human airway cells requires time and specific conditions, which help the cells mature. This allows the lab cells to develop into the different cells living in a real human airway. To do this, study authors refined a culturing technique called air-liquid interface so they could more closely simulate the conditions in an actual patient's lungs. After culturing, scientists exposed the cells to low and high concentrations of purified spike protein. The results revealed differences in gene expression, which remained in the cells even after the infection passed. The most affected genes include ones controlling the body's inflammatory response. So it'll be interesting to see where that comes from. But again, we can think, most likely it could have happened from an animal, of course, but so much of the evidence seems to suggest that it came from this Wuhan Institute of Virology, which was specializing in using the spike protein to add gain of function to coronaviruses. So I wonder if the people who stupidly funded with your money the Wuhan Institute of Virology, even when our own government was saying maybe we should not do this, I wonder if they'll have any accountability. You know, maybe we should look to the top, the highest paid federal employee, not Joe Biden. No. Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci, will he be asked to be responsible for him stupidly funding the virology lab that was doing gain of function research, I guess, in a way that was haphazard because the State Department had cables saying, please, this isn't a good idea. And now people are having some people are having long-lasting gene modification because of this virus that came out most likely of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. This is what happens when we let wannabe gods who just do whatever special interests or ignorant pseudoscience tells them to do, when they become so entrenched into every aspect of our life. Truly astonishing, isn't it, when you think about it? Remember, the National Institute for Health, maybe they always haven't had, the best track record. Here, let's read this story from NPR.org. This is in 2005, May 27th. Such a long, long time ago, especially for those who are weaned on herd mentality from the state media. Well, here's an official state media outlet, NPR. So any low information people listening right now who really love state media, you've got to take this as gospel. This is state media here talking. NPR says the National Institutes of Health tested AIDS drugs on foster children. Oh, come on. That can't be from the state media. Why would they report something like that? There's got to be an explanation. Earlier this May, the Associated Press, this is in May 27th, 2005. This was back when the Democratic Party still cared about going against mass surveillance. Remember when they cared about being against big pharma? Remember those days? Remember when they would protest against the wars instead of lying about staying in Afghanistan and going into regime change in Syria like they do now? Remember those good old days? I remember them. Pepperidge Farm remembers them. Allstate remembers them. What is the name of that company that always says that? Is it Allstate or State Farm or who cares? They're all the same. Pepperidge Farm, Gold Crackers, whatever it is. It doesn't matter. Anyways, back to this story. This beautiful organization, NPR.org, reports that the AP, Associated Press, remember back when the Associated Press tried to hide their bias? Now they just issue press releases for Joe Biden whenever Joe Rogan makes them look bad, right? Well, now, back in the day in 2005, Ed Gordon writes that the AP reported that the National Institutes of Health researchers tested AIDS drugs on hundreds of foster children in the late 80s and 90s. In many instances, the drugs were given without independent advocates who monitored the safety of these children. How dare they? They can't possibly be telling us this. Oh, my goodness. National Institutes of Health, that's where Dr. Fauci works. Oh, wow. How could it possibly be? This is the same group that the stupid NBC Today drags this guy out every day, doesn't he? They drag this guy out every day representing the National Institutes of Health to tell us what we're supposed to do. Take off the mask, he says lately, right? Take off the mask. So this is supposed to be, take it to the books. You can take it to the bank. You can do whatever you need to do. This is solid gospel stuff, whatever the National Institutes of Health does. And here they were, according to the state media outlet NPR and AP, testing AIDS drugs on hundreds of foster children in the late 80s and 90s. In many instances, the drugs were given without independent advocates who monitor the safety of these children. Yes, I read it again just so you can hear what's going on there. It's sad. I think a lot of people, this is Dr. Gordon, or let's see, who is this? Who is this here? Oh, Ed Gordon. He's the NPR reporter. Ed Gordon says, I think a lot of people would be shocked and will be shocked at this story gets further play in the media to find out just how many young people were in fact part of this, quote, experiment, if you will. When you found out and when you looked at the numbers, did it surprise you? And he's asking Dr. Jonathan Fishbein, an AIDS research expert at the NIH. And he says, I was surprised. I did not realize that foster children were a readily available source of clinical trial participants. I don't feel that foster children should not be given this opportunity to be involved in research, but I do feel strongly that federal rules regarding the use of foster children ought to be followed closely. He goes on to say, one of the things you need to consider is that back in the late 80s and 90s, when there were no established treatments for children with AIDS, that clinical research was the only opportunity for some of these children to get some of the drugs believed to be beneficial to their condition. I think these children are easily available to researchers, and I think that the issue of protection is one that needs to be more closely scrutinized by the institutional review boards where the research is conducted. Many of the states where the research was conducted require that advocates be appointed to oversee each child who is enrolled in a clinical trial. Man, could you imagine that? Who in the heck thinks that's an ethical thing to do? Who thinks that's ethical? That foster kids that don't have proper guardians were giving experimental AIDS drugs by the National Institutes for Health, the same group that Dr. Fauci represents now. Man, can't believe that's possible. No way. No way. Can't be. But you heard it on NPR. That's a state media outlet, so it must be true. Wow. Isn't that horrible? Sick, isn't it? Who would do that? You don't know what those drugs are going to do. They're experimental drugs, and you're going to give them to foster kids who don't have anybody standing up for them? Same group that tells you, go ahead and vaccinate the kids. There's no legal liability if you vaccinate them. There's no who in the world would listen to that? Who would listen to that? This is part of our Great Remembering series where we remember what the state media outlets have said in the past about the pharmaceutical companies and, in this case, government agencies that we're supposed to just blindly trust now because it's cool. CBS News reports of June 3rd, 2020, Watchdog urges the SEC to investigate vaccine maker Moderna. An anti-corruption wait a second, Moderna, they do one of these new vaccines. So why would an anti-corruption watchdog group urge the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission to investigate top executives at Moderna, the biotech firm developing a promising coronavirus vaccine, for allegedly manipulating the stock market? Now, if they're just perfect angels that would not get anything wrong to the point where people want to give this product that they've made to children for a virus that doesn't seem to have significant impact on children for the most part, that doesn't make any sense. Why would they? It says this misconduct was particularly egregious because it involved not only financial fraud and manipulation of the financial markets, but also because it exploited widespread fears surrounding the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, wrote Kyle Herrig, who heads Accountable U.S. in a letter to the SEC. I strongly urge the SEC to investigate these matters. The group's concerns center on insider trading activity at Moderna after the company last month announced positive results in phase 1 trials of its coronavirus vaccine. The news pushed up the company's stock price 30% to an all-time high of $87. In the days following the announcement, Moderna CEO, other executives, and funds controlled by the chairman of its board sold about $90 million worth of company shares. Now, why would they be so greedy? I don't understand it. They're just completely driven by science only. I mean, come on, profit and greed like that, doing insider stuff. They wouldn't do that, would they? I mean, CBS, NBC, ABC tells us this thing is take it to the bank. It's perfectly fine. Not a single problem ever, 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 never, 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 never question Moderna. But here they are. CBS News is telling us just last year that they needed to be investigated for financial fraud and manipulation of the financial markets. Goodness. Why would we want to support a company blindly that has financial fraud activity behaviors being attempted? You see how stupid this stuff is, folks? You see how dumb this stuff is? This is very stupid that you're asked to have blind faith for corporations by the same outlets that are telling you just a year ago that they're doing financial fraud behavior. According to CBS News, it says there. Moderna's vaccine results have yet to be reviewed by outside experts or published in a medical journal, and some have questioned whether the company was too quick in publicizing the trial data. In the letter to the SEC, Herrig called the timing of the post-announcement trade suspicious and questioned whether the company and the executives had coordinated ahead of releasing the trial results, including when the shares would be sold. Accountable.us is a nonprofit supported by the New Venture Fund, which funds left-leaning policy groups. Evidence suggests that Moderna and at least two of its officers, possibly among others, may have improperly exploited coronavirus fears to boost the company's value as well as their own bank accounts, Herrig wrote. My goodness, no way. No way. There's no way that could be. The CBS tells us every day and ABC tells us every day, get your vaccine from Moderna. Why in the world could that be the same? This is so stupid. This is like talking about the most infantilized, idiotic stuff, right? To report this stuff, right? With a straight face. On Wednesday, medical news website Stat reported that Bancel recently told investors at a conference that Moderna rushed out its coronavirus testing results in order to avoid a possible leak of the findings. Wow. CBS News religiously reports at the end, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the government's top infectious disease official, said that the phase 3 trial of Moderna's vaccine could start as early as July. So this was from June 3rd, 2020, almost a year ago. So now CBS and everybody and ABC tells you, well, get your Moderna shot. You know, just never did anything ever. They just came down from heaven, from the mythic realm of scientism, and there's no possibility of error. Amazing, right? You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gronowski. We'll pick up with more in just a moment.
Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality, grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a 6th-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR. Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved 2 people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck in a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career, with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
Neighbor's Choice returns. David Gronowski here, your host. Our website, aneighborschoice.com. That's aneighborschoice.com. You can also email me, hello@aneighborschoice.com. If you have any guest suggestion, topic, question, what have you, you can send it there. And let's continue our great remembering series. Here is a story in May 7th, 2006 by Washington Post. It says, panel faults Pfizer in 96 clinical trial in Nigeria. Remember Pfizer? We talked about Moderna. Just last year, CBS was saying they had some kind of serious issues going on with insider trading and potentially financial fraud. Here, that's CBS News reporting. Moderna, how about Pfizer, the other big company that's considered to be impeccable to the point where they can have total legal immunity for their own product. They won't stand by their own product's efficacy and safety, but they're going to get a total blanket 100% media push for it. Amazing. Amazing market power. But here's what they say in Washington Post. Again, Washington Post is one of those same dumb Luddite parrot outlets that says everything what everybody else says. But here we go back to 2006, which is like a century ago for people who are stuck on dumb groupthink, trendy, fashionable thought. But for normal people, it's just 2006. Not that long ago. A panel of Nigerian medical experts has concluded that Pfizer Inc. violated international law during a 96 epidemic by testing an unapproved drug on children with brain infections at a field hospital. That finding is detailed in a lengthy Nigerian government report that has remained unreleased for 5 years. Despite inquiries from the children's attorneys and from the media, the Washington Post recently obtained a copy of the confidential report, which is attracting congressional interest. It was provided by a source who asked to remain anonymous because of personal safety concerns. Whoa! Why would he have personal safety concerns? And why is the Washington Post telling us this from 2006? I thought these companies are beyond criticism. That's why they have legal immunity and you're supposed to put their products into your kids, right? The report concludes that Pfizer never obtained authorization from the Nigerian government to give the unproven drug to nearly 100 children and infants. Pfizer selected the patients at a field hospital in the city of Kano, where the children had been taken to be treated for an often deadly strain of meningitis. At the time, Doctors Without Borders was dispensing approved antibiotics at the hospital. Pfizer's experiment was an illegal trial of an unregistered drug, the Nigerian panel concluded, and a clear case of exploitation of the ignorant. The test came to public attention in December 2000 when the Post published the results of year-long investigation into overseas pharmaceutical testing. The news was met in Nigeria with street demonstrations, lawsuits, and demands for reform. Pfizer contended that its researchers traveled to Kano with a purely philanthropic motive to help fight the epidemic, which ultimately killed more than 15,000 Africans. The committee rejected that explanation, pointing out that Pfizer physicians completed their trial and left while the epidemic was still raging. That's not nice. The panel said an oral form of Trovon, the Pfizer drug used in the test, had apparently never been given to children with meningitis. There are no records documenting that Pfizer told the children or their parents that they were part of an experiment, it said. Now, why would you experiment on children without them knowing about it? Why would you? Come on now. What kind of a company would think that's okay to do? What kind of a company would think that's okay to do? That's just disturbing. There are no records documenting that. So an approval letter from a Nigerian ethics committee, which Pfizer used to justify its actions, had been concocted and backdated by the company's lead researcher in Kano, the report said. Goodness. So Washington Post, which is a very authoritative state media outlet, is reporting in 2006 that Pfizer, one of the companies you're not allowed to question by these same stupid outlets like Washington Post today, that an approval letter from a Nigerian's ethics committee, which Pfizer used to justify its action, had been concocted and backdated by the company's lead researcher. Whoa! Do Nigerian lives matter to Pfizer? Well, apparently this doesn't seem to be the case. The panel concluded that the experiment violated Nigerian law, the International Declaration of Helsinki that governs ethical medical research, and the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. 5 children died after being treated with the experimental antibiotic, and others showed signs of arthritis, although there is no evidence the drug played a part. 6 children died while taking a comparison drug. See, part of being an adult, part of being a Christian is that it is that you reject sacrifice, that you do not have a cheapening of human life, where you do experiments on kids when they don't know what's going on. Caiaphas said it is better that one man die than the whole nation perish. That's wrong. That's a lie. That's what he said as he led the murder of Jesus. And we know that's wrong. And part of being civilized in the 21st century is to reject such sacrificial, unethical, barbaric behavior. Should never be experimenting on kids to the point where 5 kids die by Pfizer. Others show signs of arthritis. The panel recommended that Pfizer be sanctioned appropriately and directed to use an unreserved apology to the government and people of Nigeria. The company should also pay an unspecified amount of restitution, the report said. The panel recommended that Nigeria enact reforms to prevent a recurrence. Aspects of the affair remain mysterious, such as why the report remains confidential. The head of the investigative panel said in a brief telephone conversation from Nigeria, "I don't really know myself why the report was never released. I did my job as a civil servant," he said. He's quoted in the report as saying he has been the target of unspecified death threats. Whoa. Unspecified death threats. I wonder who would have made those. That's the report of the Washington Post, 2006, about Pfizer. I'm David Gronowski. We'll continue in just a moment with Hour 2.
Your home for news, talk, and information. 1040 WHBO Pinellas Park. Tampa Bay's all new News Talk 1040.
It's the only way I get news.
From ABC News, I'm Michelle Franzen. Fast-moving details in the investigation of Rudy Giuliani's alleged lobbying efforts overseas. That probe began in 2019. Today, federal agents executed search warrants at several locations, including his apartment. Giuliani's son speaking to reporters about the probe.
Outside Rudy Giuliani's Manhattan apartment, his son Andrew called the FBI search of his father's home and office absurd.
Anybody, any American, whether you're red or blue, should be extremely disturbed by what happened here today.
Search warrant in hand, the FBI roused Giuliani from bed just after 6 a.m. and seized electronic devices as part of an ongoing criminal investigation into possible foreign lobbying violations. The FBI also visited the home of Giuliani's ally, the Washington, D.C.-based attorney Victoria Tensing, as part of the same investigation. Aaron Katersky, ABC News, New York.
President Biden, on the eve of 100 days in office, delivers his first address to a joint session of Congress in just a few hours. A limited number of lawmakers will be present due to the pandemic. The president will focus on the nation's recovery. ABC political director Rick Klein.
It's a critical moment, a chance to communicate directly to the American people, and at a critical time in terms of fighting COVID-19, just around the opportunity to put that in the past, and then to start to talk about this massive reorganization of a social agenda that we're talking about from President Biden.
GOP Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina will deliver the Republican rebuttal. In Georgia, a federal grand jury has charged 3 Georgia men connected to the shooting death of Ahmaud Arbery with federal hate crimes and attempted kidnapping charges. The Justice Department making the announcement today. Arbery was shot while jogging through a neighborhood in Brunswick last February. A judge in North Carolina ruling today that the family of Andrew Brown Jr. can see the footage of the deputies involved in that incident. You're listening to ABC News.
Attention timeshare owners. Getting out of your timeshare can feel like a battle. All you want is to save some money, reduce your stress, and stop paying for something you aren't even using. But the process can be daunting, frustrating, and confusing. But it doesn't have to be. With Newton Group, you get access to an exclusive secret weapon to get out of your timeshare. This secret weapon is something only Newton Group offers and was developed to help timeshare owners just like you save thousands of dollars and regain control of their finances. And this secret weapon is a key part of why we have an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau, 4.7 out of 5 stars on Trustpilot, and a proven track record to legally relieve you from the financial burden of your timeshare. If you want out of your timeshare, visit besttimeshareexit.com to learn more about this exclusive secret weapon to get out of your timeshare. Go to besttimeshareexit.com or call 877-TOP-EXIT. That's besttimeshareexit.com to get you out of your timeshare. Go to besttimeshareexit.com now or call 877-TOP-EXIT.
People in Philadelphia who want a COVID vaccine are urged to stop by the Pennsylvania Convention Center. Demand in the city has been slipping, and now there's about 4,000 unused doses of the vaccine. The first juror in the Chauvin murder trial to speak publicly following that trial, talking about the one holdup during deliberations.
Chauvin trial juror Brandon Mitchell says in deliberations they were almost all on the same page except one juror over a lesser charge. He says they went word for word over instructions and reached a verdict.
We literally broke down the sentences and broke down the words and what the meanings were. It just described it several different ways from different perspectives until we came to a common conclusion.
Alex Brachet, ABC News, Washington.
Chauvin was found guilty on 2 counts of murder and 1 count of manslaughter last week. He'll be sentenced in June. Apollo 11 astronaut Michael Collins has died.
While Apollo 11 astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin made history as the first men to walk on the moon,
that's one small step for man.
It was their crewmate Michael Collins who kept the Columbia service module in orbit above, awaiting their return from the surface. In an autobiography, Collins admitting he didn't have the best seat for the flight, but that he was perfectly satisfied with the one he had. Collins would become the director of the National Air and Space Museum and later the undersecretary of the Smithsonian Institution. Collins died at 90 of cancer, according to his family. Dave Packer, ABC News.
This is ABC News.
Your nose is the body's air filter, the first line of defense against airborne allergens, bacteria, and viruses. You wash your hands to protect your health. Now you can clean your nose with Navage. Online at Navage.com. Navage. Clean nose, healthy life.
Show your age. Show strength. Show swagger. Show silky smooth hair with Hair Biology Argan Oil Taming Serum. Designed to work with your hair as you age. Proudly show your age with Hair Biology. Available at Target and Target.com.
Michelle Franz and ABC News.
Hello, this is David Kronosky with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a sixth-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR.
What's better than a stimulus check? Another stimulus check. If you have full coverage insurance, you qualify for up to $150 cash back for your broken windshield. Auto Glass America will install a premium quality replacement with a lifetime warranty at no cost to you. Wherever you are, Auto Glass America comes to you with free mobile service. Make your money go farther with Auto Glass America. 813-96-GLASS. That's 813-96-GLASS. Auto Glass America.
From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gornowski. So glad to be with you live on FM AM podcast video stream. On the program that gets to the heart of the matter, we get to the meat of the matter, which is that we need skin in the game. We need freedom. We need liberty. We need prosperity. We need personhood. We need nonviolence. We need creativity. We need hope. And we're here to kindle those things together like we always do, because we have a mission to bring innovation and creativity back to the conversation in this country and around the world. As our growing international audience attests, our message of freedom, our message that looks at anthropology and history, guided by the ethics of nonviolence, continues to reach people all over this planet. I also want to give a shout out to our friend Shannon Braswell, who we have on the program often on the radio show, A Neighbor's Choice, which you're listening to now, as well as our Things Hidden podcast, where we get into anthropology. He's got a new article out on theamericanconservative.com about his new project, which we talked about on the show together, brightnews.com. And I want to read a little bit from it. Crafting New Narratives for Black America. Bright News offers a latter-day campfire around which Black Americans can tell and hear stories about their world. The primordial birthplace of culture is a scene of human beings sharing stories about the world around a fire. The communal need to learn from events and make sense of dangers and mysteries has always compelled us to share narratives about the way the world is, as well as how it ought to be. In modern society, Black Americans face a crisis of news and culture. We simply have too few reliable outlets for truthful news and commentary. One does not have to explain cancel culture to non-leftist Black Americans in the public square. They are ridiculed, vilified, silenced, deplatformed, and their sites are demonetized. Their access to social media is regularly throttled if they rebel from billionaires' cookie-cutter scripts. The corporate press that lied our families into endless wars and endless debt are trying to convince the Black community that the only path to power and justice is through the failed theories of dead French postmodernists like Foucault. If you are a young Black person who wants to change the world, the media preaches to you constantly through entertainment and social media curation that you must join rich Marxists like the founders of BLM, whose exploitative organizations rake in millions, do nothing to change bad nanny state laws that endanger lives, pledge to disrupt the nuclear family, and televise the burning down of minority-owned businesses in predominantly minority communities as a show of force. They shout down Black people who reject the ideas of Marx, Keynes, and Marcuse, while calling to defund the police that protect Black neighborhoods from the high crime rates which result from failed elitist social engineering. Where do Black Americans go to hear thoughtful voices? Where do they go to hear the truth about the government's failed nutrition guidelines? Where do they go to see role models of Black excellence, curing cancer, defying aging, loving their families, and planning expeditions to new galaxies? BrightNews.com is a news and culture aggregator that curates and highlights important voices who tell the truth. It exposes the deceitful corruption of our elites and the repulsive hypocrisy of cancel culture. BrightNews.com strives to find and present clear and authentic news and information amid the noise of dishonest, elitist narratives. For many years, media platforms have increasingly embraced corporate leftist politics and censored material from many content creators in order to silence and marginalize them. This has not only had a devastating effect on people's ability to get objective information and news, but has also fueled political polarization and stoked the devastating culture wars that cause great suffering in our country. BrightNews.com is a media platform that seeks to reverse this negative effect by covering a range of interesting ideas that brave content creators regularly explore. The target audience for this site is, but is not limited to, the Black community, which is fed up with culture wars and misinformation coming from the corporate media and leftist political groups. BrightNews.com intends to broaden the discussion on important issues that are rarely discussed, with the hope of offering Black Americans and people of the African diaspora around the world the opportunity to take back control of their communities and lives. BrightNews.com highlights the work and thoughts of various responsible content creators who cover a range of ideas and topics such as revolutionary technology, culture, science, economics, politics, entertainment, and more. It is time to have an inviting and exciting hub of storytelling about our world. It's time to highlight positive role models demonstrating financial independence, scientific discovery, and self-sacrifice for their families. We will build a new fire around which true stories can be told, a digital gathering place where young hearts can once again glow with hope, dignity, and wonder. It is time for the era of bright news. That's the new piece by Shannon Braswell in the AmericanConservative.com. Very interesting stuff and very much in alignment with what we believe, which is why Shannon's been such a common feature on our Things Hidden podcast and radio show, because he's a great friend. And he's also a part of the new film that you saw on, or maybe you haven't seen, so you need to go to aneighborschoice.com. That's aneighborschoice.com and look at the new Things Hidden film that features a great discussion around a campfire. It's exciting to have a new media revolution emerge. It's exciting to see new voices, new platforms that will become the institutions of tomorrow. That's what it's all about. We have to build back better. We have to build back better from the horrible failure of the misinformation era that so dominated so much of the 20th century with collectivism. We must build back better from that dark moment in history and build something better and more beautiful than that. Look at CNN.com. CNN.com says feds found Pfizer too big to nail. This is from CNN Special Investigation Unit, Drew Griffin and Andy Segal of April 2nd, 2010, back when CNN was not obsessed with being a PR firm for political stuff. They used to actually do good stories. Feds found Pfizer too big to nail. Imagine being charged with a crime, CNN says, but an imaginary friend takes the rap for you. That is essentially what happened when Pfizer, the world's largest pharmaceutical company, was caught illegally marketing Bextra, a painkiller that was taken off the market in 2005 because of safety concerns. When the criminal case was announced last fall, federal officials touted their prosecution as a model for tough, effective enforcement. It sends a clear message to the pharmaceutical industry, said Kevin Perkins, assistant director of the FBI's Criminal Investigation Division. But beyond the fanfare, a CNN special investigation found another story, one that officials downplayed when they declared victory. It's a story about the power major pharmaceutical companies have, even when they break the laws intended to protect patients. The story begins in 2001 when Bextra was about to hit the market. The drug was part of a revolutionary class of painkillers known as COX-2 inhibitors that were supposed to be safer than generic drugs, but at 20 times the price of ibuprofen. Pfizer and its marketing partner, Pharma planned to sell Bextra as a treatment for acute pain, the kind you have after surgery. But in November 2001, the U.S. FDA said Bextra was not safe for patients at high risk of heart attacks and strokes. The FDA approved Bextra only for arthritis and menstrual cramps. It rejected the drug in higher doses for acute surgical pain. Promoting drugs for unapproved uses can put patients at risk by circumventing the FDA's judgment over which products are safe and effective. For that reason, off-label promotion is against the law. But with billions of dollars of profits at stake, marketing and sales managers across the country nonetheless targeted anesthesiologists, foot surgeons, orthopedic surgeons, and oral surgeons. Anyone that used a scalpel for a living, one district manager advised in a document prosecutors would later cite. A manager in Florida emailed his sales rep a scripted sales pitch that claimed falsely that the FDA had given Bextra a clean bill of health, all the way up to 40 milligram dose, which is twice what the FDA actually said was safe. Internal company documents show that Pfizer and Pharma, which Pfizer later bought, used a multi-million-dollar medical education budget to pay hundreds of doctors as speakers and consultants to tout Bextra. Pfizer said in court that the company's intent was pure, just like they said in Nigeria, remember, to foster a legal exchange of scientific information among doctors. But an internal marketing plan called for training physicians to serve as public relations spokespeople. According to Lewis Morris, chief counsel to the Inspector General at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, they pushed the envelope so far past any reasonable interpretation of the law that it's simply outrageous. Pfizer's chief compliance officer, Doug Lanker, said that in a large sales force, successful sales techniques spread quickly, but that top Pfizer executives were not aware of the significant mispromotion issue with Bextra until federal prosecutors began to show them the evidence. By April 2005, when Bextra was taken off the market, more than half of its $1.7 billion in profits had come from prescriptions written for uses the FDA had rejected. But CNN says they're too big to nail. But when it came to prosecuting Pfizer for its fraudulent marketing, the pharmaceutical giant had a trump card. Just as the giant banks on Wall Street were deemed too big to fail, Pfizer was considered too big to nail. Why? Because any company convicted of a major healthcare fraud is automatically excluded from Medicare and Medicaid. Well, we can't have that. Convicting Pfizer on Bextra would prevent the company from billing federal health programs for any of its products. It would be a corporate death sentence. Prosecutors said that excluding Pfizer would most likely lead to Pfizer's collapse with collateral consequences, disrupting the flow of Pfizer's products to Medicare and Medicaid. You need that, right? I mean, how else can you deal with all the diseases? I mean, you've got to have them, right? Sorry. It's just great to provide commentary. Causing the loss of jobs, including those of Pfizer employees who were not involved in the fraud, and causing significant losses for Pfizer shareholders. We have to ask whether by excluding the company from Medicare and Medicaid, are we harming our patients? Said Lewis Morris of the Department of Health and Human Services. So Pfizer and the feds cut a deal. Instead of charging Pfizer with a crime, prosecutors would charge a Pfizer subsidiary, Pharma, an Upjohn company, whatever the heck that is. The CNN special investigation found that the subsidiary, they had to find a scapegoat, in other words, is nothing more than a shell company whose only function is to plead guilty. This is stupid. Here you are, guys. Here's your grand This is your government. This is exactly what the sausage making of your government looks like. According to court documents, Pfizer Inc. owns Pharmacia Corporation, which owns Pharmacia and Upjohn LLC, which owns Pharmacia and Upjohn Co. LLC, which in turn owns Pharmacia and Upjohn Co. Inc. It is the great-great-grandson of the parent company. Public records show that the subsidiary was incorporated in Delaware on March 27, 2007, the same day Pfizer lawyers and federal prosecutors agreed that the company would plead guilty in a kickback case against a company Pfizer had acquired a few years earlier. As a result, Pharmacia and Upjohn Company Incorporated, the subsidiary, was excluded from Medicare without ever having sold so much as a single pill, and Pfizer was free to sell its products to federally funded health programs. So they created a little shell company. They scapegoated the little shell company. That was the sacrificial lamb. You know, you put the blood over the door mantle or whatever, right? And you get rid of Pharmaceutical and Upjohn Company, whatever the heck that is, and you're back in business. 2 years later, with Bextra, the shell company once again pleaded guilty. It was, in effect, Pfizer's imaginary friend stepping up to take the rap. It is true that if a company is created to take a criminal plea, but it's just a shell, the impact of an exclusion is minimal and non-existent, Morris said. Prosecutors say there was no viable alternative. If we prosecute Pfizer, they get excluded. The federal prosecutor who oversaw the investigation said, a lot of the people who work for the company who haven't engaged in criminal activity would get hurt. Did the punishment fit the crime? Pfizer says yes. It paid nearly $1.2 billion in a criminal fine for Bextra, the largest fine the federal government has ever collected. It paid $1 billion more to settle a batch of civil suits, although it denied wrongdoing on allegations that it illegally promoted 12 other drugs. In all, Pfizer lost the equivalent of 3 months' profit. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world but to lose one's soul? It maintained its ability to do business with the federal government. Pfizer says it takes responsibility for the illegal promotion of Bextra. I can tell you unequivocally that Pfizer perceived the Bextra matter as an incredibly serious one, Pfizer's chief compliance officer said. To prevent it from happening again, Pfizer has set up what it calls leading-edge systems to spot signs of illegal promotion by closely monitoring sales reps and tracking prescription sales. Pfizer says the company has learned its lesson, but after years of overseeing similar cases against other major drug companies, even Lux isn't sure $2 billion in penalties is a deterrent when the profits from illegal promotion can be so large. I worry that the money is so great, he said, that dealing with the Department of Justice may be just of a cost of doing business. Wow. Amazing. Amazing. Amazing what the corporate press reports when they can on CNN.com. I'm David Gronowski, back in just a moment on A Neighbor's Choice.
David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck on a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa.
Not attorney spokeswoman.
Hello, David Gornowski here. We continue looking at the official state media's reports on Pfizer and other companies, Moderna and Johnson & Johnson, companies that they want you to now say could be completely 100%, 120% taken to the bank. Nothing possibly, ever, could possibly be mistaken or incorrect about what they have to offer. That's why they won't take any legal skin in the game to back up their products. But these same outlets that are trying to tell you these companies are saintly, perfect, 100% infallibly take it to the bank, they have stories from all over every year almost. Here's one. The Guardian says WikiLeaks cables say that Pfizer used dirty tricks to avoid clinical trial payout. Cables say drug giant hired investigators to find evidence of corruption on Nigerian Attorney General to persuade him to drop legal action. World's biggest pharmaceutical company hired investigators to unearth evidence of corruption against the Nigerian Attorney General in order to persuade him to drop legal action over a controversial drug trial involving children with meningitis, according to a leaked U.S. Embassy cable. This is from 2010. Pfizer was sued by the Nigerian state and federal authorities who claimed the children were harmed by a new antibiotic, Trovin, during the trial, which took place in the middle of the meningitis epidemic of unprecedented scale in Kano in the north of Nigeria in 96. Last year, the company came to a tentative settlement with the Kano state government, which was to cost it $75 million. But the cable suggests that the U.S. drug giant did not want to pay out to settle the two cases, one civil and one criminal, brought by the Nigerian federal government. The cable reports a meeting between Pfizer's country manager and U.S. officials at the Abuja embassy on 9th April 2009. It states, according to Pfizer, had hired investigators to uncover corruption links to Federal Attorney General Michael to expose him and put pressure on him to drop the federal cases. He said Pfizer's investigators were passing this information to local media. The cable, classified confidential by economic counselor Robert Tanzi, continues a series of damaging articles detailing alleged corruption ties were published in February and March, and they contended that Pfizer had much more damaging information on him and that his cronies were pressuring him to drop the suit for fear for further negative articles. You think they'd ever use that in American media? Oh, I'm sure not. Never. There's no way that would possibly happen. Back in a moment.
Find the best coverage of Florida sports all in one place.
SportsTalkFlorida.com covers all the Florida teams you know and love with in-depth interviews, original coverage, and insight on the team that makes the news in Florida.
Whether it's the Bucks, Lightning, Rays, Jags, Dolphins, Marlins,
Sports Talk Florida has got you covered.
or any of our college teams like the Knowles, Gators, Bulls, Canes, or Knights, you can find it all at SportsTalkFlorida.com.
Sports Talk Florida has got you covered. SportsTalkFlorida.com.
The FBI and other authorities executed a search warrant today at the New York City home and office of Rudy Giuliani. They're looking into the former New York City mayor's lobbying abroad while he was working as former President Trump's personal attorney.
This is disgusting. This is absolutely absurd, and it's the continued politicization of the Justice Department that we have seen. And it has to stop.
Giuliani's son, Andrew. There will be 2 women seated behind President Biden as he addresses a joint session of Congress tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
So excited to be up there with Kamala, Vice President of the United States. Not just a woman, African-American woman, Asian-American woman, a minority woman there. So it is historic.
Pelosi speaking to ABC's Rachel Scott. A federal grand jury has charged 3 Georgia men who were connected to the shooting death of Ahmaud Arbery with federal hate crimes and attempted kidnapping charges. Danielle Albinger, ABC News.
A Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm your host, David Gronowski, as we continue live, now joined by our friend in the Central Florida area, Sir Owen. How you doing?
David, it's good to be with you. We're having a good day here. How about you?
Oh, I'm doing great. And we're just recounting all these different, these media outlets, CBS, ABC, NBC, CNBC, Politico, New York Times, Washington Post, all the same groupthink media outlets that tell us we all must take all these new drugs, no question asked, not allowed to dissent, not allowed to think. They got all over Joe Rogan's case because he said, if I'm 21 and I'm healthy, I don't necessarily have to take that vaccine. And they just tore into him. They're jealous that he's got a bigger platform than all of their nightly newscasts combined, pretty much. And yet we're reading some of the stories today on the show of these same companies in these same media outlets that now tell us do not ever question what their drugs are. We just see a few years ago, story after story after story of these same companies getting into all kinds of mischief and problems. I mean, look at the New York Times here. They report a Pfizer whistleblower is awarded $1.4 million. A federal jury awarded $1.37 million in damages to a former Pfizer scientist who claimed she was sickened by a genetically engineered virus at a company laboratory and then fired for raising safety concerns. The case, which was decided Thursday, has raised questions about the safety of workers in the biotechnology industry and about regulations to protect them. Goes on to say that the jury in the United States District Court in Hartford did not actually address whether the virus had caused the paralyzing illness from which the scientist Becky McLean still suffers. The judge had dismissed that claim before the trial, saying that Ms. McLean did not have adequate evidence and that it was a matter for workers' compensation. But the jury ruled that Pfizer had violated laws protecting free speech and whistleblowers by retaliating against Ms. McLean, who worked from the company from 96 through 2005. These are the same companies now that the same media outlet, New York Times, tells us no problem. They have total legal immunity from their product. Don't ever dissent from their products. Isn't that amazing?
Well, David, I mean, of course, you know, we have everybody in the mass media now is singing from the same script, and the interconnectedness and the small number of owners who control the mass media in the world. Then what is it? 6 companies control 90% of the mass media in the world. And then when you get down to looking at the ownership of those companies, you'll see probably Vanguard and BlackRock are the biggest stockholders in each of the 6 controlling entities that control all of the things. So basically, you have everyone singing from the same script. So, I mean, there's absolutely zero confidence. If you look into all of the latest surveys on mainstream media, the confidence in mainstream media has gone away, I think, and I don't think it'll ever come back. I mean, the papers, if they didn't have political use by the oligarchs and the people who control them, they wouldn't exist.
Right.
So I'm not surprised that you get all these kind of, apparently at the moment there is a great push to have this compliance. And we've gone from, you know, take your shots and all to what you were pointing out, which is comply. Don't you dare change or have any kind of independent thought or thinking along these lines. I mean, you're going to have to do what we say do. Wow. And that's a whole discussion that, you know, you can get lost in, but I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that they are wishy-washy and they change the story so quickly. You know, the people get used to one narrative and then they'll change the story just a little bit and they tell a lie and they move right on. You know, the Russians were that Trump was a sock puppet for the Russians and all these things, and they get caught in the lies and they just move right on. They don't straighten it out. They don't seem to call them on it. So I have no idea. Where it's all going, but it's very interesting, David.
Yeah, here's another story in the New York Times, which tells us that Moderna and Pfizer's vaccines, 100% take it to the bank, go get it, even if you're a baby, they want you to get it. That's what they're saying now. But here's in 2009, the New York Times says Pfizer pays $2.3 billion to settle marketing case, to settle civil and criminal allegations. They have situations here where this was New York Times. It was Pfizer's 4th settlement over illegal marketing activities since 2002. Now, this was in 2009, so we don't know how many has happened since. But the story says that the government charged that executives and sales representatives throughout Pfizer's ranks planned and executed schemes to illegally market not only Bextra, but also Geodone, an antipsychotic, Zyvox, an antibiotic, and Lyrica, which treats nerve pain. While the government said the fine was a record sum, the $2.3 billion fine amounts to less than 3 weeks of Pfizer's sales. So it's kind of a revolving door relationship, and the media is talking about it honestly years ago, but now they have a different song, right?
Well, the same major stockholders of the New York Times are the same major stockholders, the 2 companies are the same major stockholders of Pfizer.
Right.
Vanguard and BlackRock. So, I mean, you've got, of course, you're going to be benevolent with the entities that you own, but of course it's hard not to own. It's not to be benevolent to all, because I think BlackRock and Vanguard are involved in 80% of the wealth in the world.
Right.
So, you know, I mean, when you get to the top of the pyramid and their stockholders pretty much control things, and that's where we are. We've come to the less than 1% controlling about 80% of the wealth of the world. Every corporation that exists, every major corporation, public corporation. 2 companies, Vanguard and BlackRock.
Reed, a commenter on our YouTube stream, says cults are typically defined as islands of mass psychosis who separate from the dominant culture that remains somewhat in touch with reality. It seems like that describes what's happening for millions of people because of these corporate media outlets who have kind of continually wrapped their audience in a cocoon of lies and mass delusion. we're seeing this cult kind of expose itself in front of everybody.
Well, I don't think that in our lifetime that the mass media will get its credibility back. People may, read to be titillated and read articles in the show business media and stuff to be titillated, but I don't think anybody who thinks can have any serious respect for or any more illusions about mainstream media. We've been through so many blatant lies and changes in my lifetime, and especially in the last 10 years, that I just don't see the credibility coming back, and also the publications, their subscriber base is going to zip. I know our Tampa Tribune and Tampa Bay Times now, which has become the Tampa Bay Times, the St. Petersburg Times and the Tampa Bay have merged, and now I think I'm going to be interested to see what their numbers are after this last election.
Right.
I have a feeling that many of their subscribers have punished them.
Right. Yeah. The same as happening in the Oscars. They said that Deadline Hollywood said that their audience fell to an all-time low. Their viewership went under 10 million. They used to have like 55 million on the Oscars. Now, just a few years later, it's down to 10 million. So it's dropping like a rock. People are tired of the corporate press, and they seem to be tired of the old Hollywood era too.
Well, I think it's more profound than that. I think I read something in Variety. They were talking about this debacle of the last Oscar, and they said, the message here is clear. Be woke and go broke.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, the industry seems to be trying to be woke, and the public just are voting with their pocketbooks and with their attention, and they're not paying attention to them.
Right.
So, be woke and go broke. I don't know about, I'm not quite all that familiar with what woke is, but it apparently is pretty rampant in the entertainment industry.
Right. Yeah, it's just the latest version of political correctness, just a more fundamentalist, vicious form of it. Speaking of someone who has a hard time being awake, Joe Biden is going to do the State of the Union, or I guess what is this called? Some kind of Drudge Report says tax the rich and give it to the poor. Tonight he wants trillions of dollars. So he's going to wear his little mask, and he is excited to let you know that as the supreme ruler, Dr. Fauci and him are wanting to let you know that you can now take your mask off when you're in a secluded trail outside. Aren't you excited to have commands like that? It's exciting, right?
I feel better, don't you? I mean, I'm going to put on my hiking boots right now.
Right. Actually,
anyway, it's an interesting thing, and they talk about the big reset that's occurring, but I think the reset is occurring, but I don't think that the COVID is simply an event that has happened in the reset, because there are things going on now in the world and have been going on in the world, and developments that are really basically causing a reset of society. And I'm only using that term because probably everybody's familiar with it, but it means different things to different people. It just means change, and change is always going on, isn't it? So, the reset is we're resetting to a new reality, but there's some factors right now that are really pushing us in that direction. And you know a great deal about that. But I was very much fascinated. I remember the 2020 Davos meeting, and when the masters of the universe come together to tell each other how, pat each other on the back. This is 1/10 of 1% people who gather there to figure out what they're going to do with their vassals. And we are their vassals because they control 80 to 90% of the wealth of the world. And I think the theme was, at least in 2020, was the things we've got to look out for, the existential challenges that they were talking about. I think were nuclear war, I think the ecological collapse, and the technological disruption.
Right.
And they wanted to focus on those things. And I think I agree with them. All COVID has done and the things that are going on now and the political zoo are part of a stew that is part of this reset that is occurring.
Right.
I mean, the threat that really grabs me is a less familiar threat of this technological disruption. And at Davos, they were all talking about the promises of technology, and these promises, are certainly real. But technology might also disrupt human society, and David, it might even disrupt the meaning of human life in numerous ways, ranging, from the creation of a global useless class to the rise of these data colonialism and even a kind of dictatorship, a digital dictatorships, if you will. Right. I mean, technology to me has the potential to be highly disruptive. I've seen it in my life. Right. I mean, I see it personally. I don't shop any much more in stores. I have things delivered. I rather order online. I'd rather do all my comparative shopping online, and that is a really big change in my life. And I'm sure other people are experiencing it as well. And automation is going to soon eliminate millions of jobs.
Right.
And everybody says, well, that's fine, but we don't have new jobs. Well, new jobs will certainly be created. It is unclear, though, whether people will be able to learn, how to do them, to learn the necessary new skills fast enough. I was thinking the other day, you have an advertiser on your show, they have a trucking company. Well, suppose you are a 50-year-old truck driver and you just lost your job to, say, a self-driving truck or self-driving vehicle. Well, there are new jobs in designing software and teaching yoga to engineers, but how in the world does a 50-year-old truck driver reinvent himself or herself as a software engineer or as a yoga teacher?
Right.
And people, I think, in the very near future are going to have to do this not just once, but again and again throughout their lives. And boy, that just wears me out thinking about it.
Right.
Because this automation revolution that we're running into right now is not going to be just a single, event, a single happening, and then following the event, the job market settles down and it goes back to what it was, into a new equilibrium. But it's going to cascade into bigger disruptions because AI is nowhere near its full potential.
Right.
So, I think that old jobs are going to disappear, new jobs will emerge, but then the new job will rapidly change and vanish. I mean, because these AIs are just seminal, but yet they're mighty powerful right now.
Well, it looks like you have the AP says that Biden is going to provide the foundations, I guess, to help people get adjusted to a more state-managed society just in time for this, technological reset. They said the AP says he's going to have a sweeping proposal for universal preschool, 2 years of free community college, $225 billion for child care, and monthly payments of at least $250 to parents. So they really like this universal basic income thing. They're going to start rolling it out with at least $250 payments to try to see if they can get people comfortable with, again, having an all central state provider. I mean, this is totally different from anything America was supposed to be, where you're supposed to have self-reliance and innovation and creativity and small businesses. But like you said, everything's being consolidated and digitized. And I guess Uncle Joe Biden is trying to provide the foundations for the beginning of a more centrally planned economy here.
Well, I mean, what I was saying is, I believe, is it possible this automation is going to create a useless class? I mean, a useless class. It's those who can't make it in the struggle against irrelevance, they would constitute a new useless class. People who are just useless, not from the viewpoint of their friends and family, of course, but they're useless from the viewpoint of the economic and the political system. And this useless class will be separated by an ever-growing gap that I see from the ever more powerful elite who have access and who control the new technologies. And I think the AI revolution is unprecedented, and it's going to also create unprecedented inequality, not just between classes, but between countries. I mean, if you think back about it, in the 19th century, I guess, like Britain and Japan, they were the first to go industrial. And then they went on, because they got so powerful, they went on to exploit the world. And if you weren't careful, the same thing, or if we're not careful, this same thing's going to happen in the 21st century with AI. I mean, David, we're already in the midst of an AI arms race with China and Russia and the USA leading the race right now. And most countries are being left far, far behind. And AI is very likely to create immense wealth in in Silicon Valley, a few high-tech hubs. And while I think other countries will either go bankrupt or become exploited data colonies. And so, I mean, we're not talking, I know people listening saying, well, I don't know, what are they smoking? But we aren't talking here about a science fiction scenario, robots rebelling against humans. We're talking about seminal and primitive AIs, which is, even though they're seminal and primitive now, they're sufficient to disrupt the global balance right now. So, I mean, an example might be just what would happen to developing economies once it's cheaper to produce textiles or automobiles in California, when it's cheaper to do it there than in Mexico. And what will happen to politics in individual countries in 20 years when somebody in San Francisco or Beijing knows the entire medical and personal history of every politician, every judge, every journalist in a particular country, including all their sexual, everything, their mental weaknesses, their corrupt dealings. Will it still be an independent country, or will it become a data colony? I mean, when you have enough data, David, you don't need to send soldiers in order to control a country. You just make a quiet telephone call.
Well, very good. Very interesting things to think about, Sir Owen. It's always great having you on. I want to give people a shout out to your. Give us a shout out to your email address. Give us a shout out to your newsletter. I want people to subscribe if they'd like to.
All right. Tamarind@hotpolitics.com.
Very good. It's always great hearing from you.
Thank you, David.
A Neighbor's Choice will be back in just a moment.
Hello, this is David Kronosky with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality, grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a 6th-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR. Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved 2 people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to CataniaCatania.com Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa. Not attorney spokeswoman.
Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm David Gronowski here as we wrap up the show with final comments. We just had a great discussion with Sir Owen, who provides a great analysis of our current affairs and the concern for where AI is going. AI is something that a lot of people are concerned about will be used to further create totalitarian control over our life, but we must persist in pursuing human ingenuity, innovation, and in the world of physical space, not just in the world of these digital domains that transhumanists like to keep everything in. Commenter says, I believe we have to build parallel structures, meaning counter economies and technologies and cultural influence at all scales to challenge and potentially defang the totalitarian beast system. Talking about permaculture and food forests. Another says, if we are good enough, they will let us get together this summer for July 4th, which happens to be the week of my 3-year anniversary for this program, A Neighbor's Choice, where we started on FM and AM. And, but yeah, I mean, they want you to have permission to go to, July 4th, take a little mask off, watch a little firework, a little gluten-free, plant-based firework. Whitney Webb is a commentator online. She says, if you think the government will let you go back to normal after their targets are met for COVID vaccinations, I encourage you to study history, like in the U.S., where emergency powers tend to stick around forever. Did you guys forget about what happened after 9/11? And that's a good point. Do whatever you want with your health, but don't be naive in believing that governments don't make permanent the emergency powers that they take for themselves in times of fear and anxiety and crisis. In other news, Carter Page sues James Comey and the FBI for $75 million, which is interesting. Wonder where that will go. Josh Hawley says that Liz Cheney has abandoned GOP members over and over as he distinguishes himself from the warmonger side of the party that she represents. Another headline that we wanted to raise attention to, it says, in American Greatness, indefinite incarceration for protesters with wrong politics, referring to folks that were at the January 6th riot, getting in longer sentence, being held in jail way longer than folks who are on left-wing riots. Daily Mail reports drunk driver 32 who said F the police and down tequila and wine during podcast just hours before she killed a cop in a hit and run, boasted about carrying a knife, being pro capital punishment, and now faces 13 charges and 15 years in jail. So the world continues to reel from this chaotic moment, but we have to keep up the fight for love. We have to keep up the fight for our families and our neighbors. We have to think positive. We have to take care of our bodies and our health. That's our choice. Let's go and do it. I'm David Gronowski. Godspeed.